Viet Cong Tunnel Cross-Section. During the Vietnam War, the Communist NVA and their Viet Cong allies soon learned that they couldn't compete in the field against the superior firepower of the United States and the other Allied forces. In response, they adopted a guerrilla strategy, striking out at their more ponderous foes before melting back into the dense undergrowth of the Vietnamese jungle. The intense vegetation wasn't enough for concealment, though, as the Americans utilized some of the most advanced surveillance and reconnaissance methods available at the time. In order to avoid detection, the VC and NVA constructed an elaborate network of underground tunnels, giving them a refuge from the overwhelming might of their enemies. The tunnels utilized by the Viet Cong were first dug by the Viet Minh, Vietnamese nationalists fighting against French colonial rule in the aftermath of World War II. A decade later, during the American involvement, the tunnel network expanded, covering hundreds of miles and multiple districts, some even stretched into neighboring Cambodia. For example, the Cu Chi tunnel system north of Saigon had 130 miles of passages. Some of the tunnels were simple burrows dug into the soil, while others were complex, multi-layered constructions with specialized compartments for various purposes. As the main purpose of the tunnels was concealment, emphasis was placed on hiding the tunnel entrances. These access points could be located at seemingly random locations in the jungle, but were often located in villages, placed under cooking pots in homes, buried under sacks of rice or other out-of-the-way locations. When the Americans started using dogs to sniff out the entrances, the openings would be placed in pig corrals and covered in manure, the scent throwing off the search. These entrances were tiny, further limiting access, sometimes being less than 2 feet in diameter. Entry points could also be located underwater, requiring a swim to access, something heavily laden Americans venturing out at night for military operations, intelligence gathering, or to gather crops or supplies. While underground, they made use of the many subterranean facilities that were carved into the soil. Though often used to move troops without detection, there were many facilities for long-term stays underground. There were sleeping quarters, often consisting of multi-layered hammocks to save space. There were also medical facilities for patching up wounded soldiers. These would be lined with salvaged American parachutes in an attempt to keep out bacteria that was ever present in the damp soil. Small-scale weapon production facilities would manufacture everything from improvised landmines to punji stakes. Other areas served as armories for weapons, supply caches, kitchens, and other storage and living areas. In the more established tunnels, there were also dedicated cinemas, where propaganda films and theatrical performances would be shown to bolster morale and reinforce the message of the Vietnamese cause. An entire culture developed underground, which included weddings, births, and other aspects of day-to-day life. Lighting in the tunnels was limited, and any illumination was provided by candles or flashlights carried by individuals. Occasionally, bicycle-powered generators could be utilized to provide electricity. These would be in specialist locations, such as the weapons manufacturing sections or medical wards. Wells would also be dug to underground aquifers, since water supplies could be contaminated by chemicals such as Agent Orange, adding a degree of self-sufficiency to the complexes and allowing the denizens to remain underground, avoiding detection from their enemies. In spite of the attempts to make life in the network livable, conditions were still miserable. As lighting was scarce, the ambience was always dim and depressing. The air was foul in spite of the ventilation shafts, and organic matter such as food or clothing would rot quickly in the damp air. Various animal species also made themselves at home among the Viet Cong, including rats, spiders, scorpions, centipedes, and a plethora of venomous snakes. Among the most insidious was a small parasite called a chigger, a species of mite that burrows into the skin, causing itching red welts to appear. To make matters worse, the tunnels would be used as makeshift cemeteries. As the Vietnam War was not about seizing territory, American planners relied on a body count of enemy combatants to determine the effectiveness of their campaigns. To frustrate their enemy, the Viet Cong would drag their deceased into the tunnels. There, the bodies would rot quickly in the damp soil, the rancid smell permeating the surrounding area. In spite of all their efforts, tunnel entrances were often discovered. The tunnel network had a series of defenses to defeat any enemy infiltration. The tunnels would not be in a straight path, but make random and often sharp turns, perfect spots for an ambush. The elevation could also change rapidly, making navigation difficult under the best of circumstances. Those unfamiliar with the layout could easily become lost in the underground labyrinth. Punji pits were among the most common traps, false floors that would give way, dropping the victim on a series of sharpened bamboo stakes. Tripwires were also used, which would be attached to a grenade or other explosive device. The tunnels, already claustrophobic under the best of circumstances, would narrow at arbitrary points, forcing the traveler to crawl on their bellies. Viet Cong would wait at these checkpoints, shooting or stabbing hapless enemy tunnel rats as they crawled through the tiny opening. Small niches were dug into the side of the tunnel, allowing the defenders to ambush unwary trespassers as they passed by. These niches could be covered with a thin layer of clay, the only opening a small slit at eye level, making it virtually undetectable until a spear-wielding VC burst through. A sudden sharp vertical climb would have a waiting VC armed with a grenade, who would toss the explosive before sealing the passage with a door and a sandbag. Even the wildlife that inhabited the tunnel network could be used as a trap against unwanted visitors. Trapdoors could open, releasing swarms of venomous scorpions onto the unwitting tunnel rat. Venomous bamboo vipers could be used as a warning system. Suspended from the ceiling at a narrow choke point, these deadly reptiles would lash out at passing infiltrators. If they were shot, the sound of the gunfire would alert the VC to their presence. If not, it would lash out, envenomating the unlucky victim. When encountered, the Americans had few options to deal with the tunnels. They were dug deep enough that strikes from B-52 heavy bombers would have limited effect. Likewise, the use of explosives were inefficient, as there could be multiple access points miles apart, so demolition charges would have limited effect. They were also designed to withstand gas, so smoke grenades and CS tear gas would rise to the surface through carefully placed ventilation shafts. Attempts at flooding the tunnels would prove equally ineffective. Each tunnel would have to be cleared manually, a task that was considered one of the most dangerous and downright unpleasant jobs of the war. The tunnel rats would descend into the subterranean labyrinth, armed with a flashlight, a .45 pistol, a knife, and incredible courage, seizing documents, sabotaging supplies, and capturing prisoners. In spite of their efforts, however, the tunnels remained in use throughout the war. The tunnels could be used on a tactical level. The Viet Cong would ambush American patrols, then fall back to their underground lair, leaving their enemies baffled as they seemed to disappear into thin air. Decoys would appear to flee from pursuing Americans, only for hidden VC to spring out in ambush before hiding again. They could also be used on a strategic level. In 1968, the Tet Offensive saw massive strikes across Vietnam, hitting hundreds of installations in a coordinated effort to destabilize the South Vietnamese and their allies. Planned for months in secret, the operation made extensive use of the tunnel network. Thousands of troops were moved underground undetected, emerging en masse to lash out against their targets. The Americans and their allies were caught by surprise and would never fully recover from the shock of the offensive. The underground network of tunnels was vital to the success of the communist war effort. They allowed the lightly armed and equipped Viet Cong and NVA to stand up against one of the most powerful militaries in the world and prevail in spite of the odds stacked against them.